The night I learned how lonely West Texas can feel was a Monday in late September. 11:37 p.m., the kind of warm that sits on your skin without moving. I was driving west on 90 because I'd misjudged the miles between towns, and the gas light had been on long enough to become a character in the car. The sky was clean and moonless. The radio only caught distant AM murmurs in Spanish and a preacher from somewhere north, his voice thin like a wire. I saw the old service station sign before the building, a dead neon outline shaped like a lightning bolt, the letters long gone. The place looked like it had lost an argument with Time One pump, 2 cracked bays, a soda machine with a faded RC Cola decal. A single yellow bulb glowed above the door, casting just enough light to make everything else darker. Cicadas threw their chorus up into the wires. When I killed the engine, the quiet landed heavy except for the pop-tick of the hot car. "Just a gallon," I said to nobody, because talking out loud felt like it kept me visible. The pump had a modern card reader grafted on, a scab of plastic on old metal, and when I slid my card in, the screen flickered, then went black, then flashed approved like it had been waiting for me all day. Diesel smell, dust, and the sweet rot you get when a place hasn't been opened in a while. The whole scene tasted like pennies. I squeezed the handle and watched the numbers roll too fast, like it was measuring something other than gas. When I let go, the hose shivered and the pump coughed twice, like it was clearing its throat to say something. I looked up and caught my reflection in the glass door of the office, a smear of a person illuminated by that one cyclone of yellow light. Inside, I could make out a desk with a ledger book open, a coffee can full of pens, and a Schlitz calendar stuck forever on June 1982. I tried the knob. It turned. The bell over the door gave a weak ding like a memory of a sound, and cool air that smelled faintly of motor oil and old paper breathed out at me. "Hello?" I said. My voice didn't carry the way it should have. It seemed to stop a few feet in front of my face and fade into something thicker than air. The ledger was filled in neat block letters, each line a name, a date, a number of gallons, a price that didn't match any reality I recognized. Tonight's date, my date, was already written there. Under name, it said mine. The pen lying across the page had a groove where a thumb had worried it for years. I don't get spooked easily, but I got light behind the knees then. "You got me mixed up with somebody else," I told the room. "And that stupid human thing where you try to make a joke when you should be leaving made me add. Unless you're giving out free gas to folks who talk to themselves." Something scratched at the back door of the bay, a quick little flutter like a bird hitting glass. And then a dog materialized from under the half-lifted garage door, ribs like barrel staves, tail twitching with caution. He was brindled, or maybe just dusty. He sat and looked up at me as if he was waiting on a decision. "Not mine," I told him. "Not our place to be." He sneezed in that explosive way dogs have and shook his head. Tags clinking, though I couldn't see a collar. A payphone hung on the wall near the soda machine, the handset wrapped in gray tape. Out of habit more than sense, I picked it up. Warmth bloomed in my palm, the living temperature of a phone someone had just set down. A dial tone like a low ocean filled my ear, then a click, then static that pushed and pulled until words sorted themselves. "You need to go now," said my voice. It was my voice, the way you hear yourself from inside your skull. "He's turning in off the highway." The dog barked once. Headlights washed over the cracked lot through the broken windows, the slow sweep of beams that come with a long trailer. A semi-truck eased into the station, but it didn't stop. It passed like a freighter in dark water, windows black, no engine noise, no sound at all. Only the light and the dust. It woke up. The bell over the door dinged again without the door moving. I put the receiver back carefully and walked out backwards, the way you do leaving a sleeping baby in a room. Outside, the pump screen had frozen on a number I don't know how to explain. 19.82 gallons at $6.66, and I hadn't put in more than a splash. The dog pressed close enough that I could feel his heat, and when I opened my car door, he jumped in, curled on the passenger floorboard like he'd always practiced being small. "Okay," I said to him, like we were in it together now. My receipt ticked from the pump and tore itself off with a breeze that didn't exist. The timestamp said 11:37 p.m. yesterday. When I glanced back, the office light had gone from yellow to the flat glow of a television tuned to snow. In that cold light, I saw a shape in the office chair, elbows on the desk, hands steepled, the outline of a cap, a jaw chewing something. I blinked, and it was only the chair, only the ledger, only a Schlitz calendar with a woman who would be a grandmother now. The radio came alive on its own when the car started, and for a few seconds it was nothing but that preacher's thin voice. "He has measured out your days." I cracked the window because the dog's breath was hot and smelled like grass and pennies, and I pulled back onto 90. When we reached the next green sign, the one that tells you how far to go, the next place, the miles didn't make sense. I had not gone far enough for it to change, but it did, and the town that should have been 15 miles ahead had become 8 behind. I didn't go back. I don't even like to think about the stretch of road that night belonged to. The dog stayed with me for 3 days, sleeping at the foot of my bed in a cheap motel until, on the morning of the 4th, he was gone, the blanket pressed with the shape of him and a single gray thread stuck in my sock. When I cleaned out the car a week later, I found the receipt under the passenger mat. The ink had bled from heat, but my name was still readable, and under it, in a different hand, one I recognize now as my own after a long day. "Next time, don't go inside." I've kept it folded in the glove compartment ever since. I tell myself it's a reminder to plan fuel stops better. What it really is proof of something I will not let my mouth say out loud. I was hired as a one-man surveying crew for a bank that had repossessed a cluster of lots north of I-20, out where the wind never seems to finish crossing and the horizon stays an arm's length away. Early November, a Tuesday that started at 7:10 a.m. with coffee that tasted like the inside of a thermos because it was, and air that stung a little in the nose before the sun warmed it. The address was a nowhere wedge of an old oil camp that had run out of luck decades ago. The only buildings left were a row of shotgun houses with porches leaning, a community hall with a metal roof that had peeled back like a can, and a church the size of a double-wide with a steeple that looked grudgingly attached. Dust on everything. Mesquite pods underfoot. Somewhere far off a pump jack kept up its slow kneeling. I set my tripod, leveled the bubble until it sat smug, and took a first shot off a rebar point that stuck out of the caliche like a finger. Work like that is ritual. Measure, note, step, sight, click. You do it right, and the ground tells you its story without raising its voice. The wind favoring one ear, the sun climbing my back, the smell of creosote when I brushed a fence post with my hip, these were the normal parts that make a day pass clean. The first odd thing was the nails. They were laid out in neat shining lines on the porch of the blue house, heads all facing west, points east, like somebody had measured them with their eye and enjoyed the alignment. I picked one up and it was warm, as if human fingers had just set it down. "Neat freak," I said to the porch, because talking keeps the mind from inventing how silence might answer. Inside the blue house, which I entered only because I needed to sight through the front window, the air was 10 degrees colder and not just shade cool. It felt like somebody had opened a door to a stone basement. My measuring wheel bumped on a threshold, then stuck. When I looked down, the wheel had sunk a fraction into the old pine, as if the wood had softened for it and then seized. I had to lift and twist to free it. I told myself the plank had split, told myself a lot of things. When I backed out and set up again in the street, a CB radio crackled from somewhere. A voice, clipped and patient like an imton a call, said, Go ahead for your mark. I don't carry a CB. The truck was 50 feet away, doors closed. The radio spoke again, same tone. My call sign from a job I had in 2015, before my kids, before my divorce. Only 3 people ever used that call sign, and one of them was me. Copy. I heard my own voice say out of the empty air. The tape in my pocket felt suddenly heavy. I wrapped it around my hand, the metal edge cutting a shallow pink groove in my palm, anchored by something dumb and physical. I kept working because quitting is something you do on purpose, and I hadn't decided to quit yet. By noon, I had points that made a shape, and I ate half a peanut butter sandwich sitting on the hood, dusted with grit because dust is democratic. I watched a curtain breathe in and out in the church across the road even though nothing else moved and the wind had gone down. The curtain wasn't lace, but it was thin enough to show the shadow of a man behind it. Big shoulders, head bowed. When I stood, the shadow stood too, as if we were yoked. Afternoon, I said, loud enough, just to say a word that belonged to the day. The shadow lifted a hand. I couldn't tell if it was a wave or a mirror of me scratching my neck. I didn't go closer because I had lines to close and a deliverable to sign. That afternoon, the GPS gave me a point that didn't agree with the world. The backlot line should have run straight to a fence corner, but on my screen, it drifted, bent a few degrees and slipped oddly around the blue house like water around a rock, rejoining itself neat and tidy 50 feet later. I walked it twice. The third time, the ground gave under my right heel, not a sinkhole, more like stepping on a mattress where solid should be. I pulled my foot up and caliche dust clung to my boot like flour. There was a smell then, not rot, not gas, but a faint sweetness I've only ever tasted once more. In a hospital hallway at midnight when someone is leaving and the machines are pretending they aren't. Okay, I told the air. You win this one. The smart thing would have been to pack up, call the bank man, tell him there was a discrepancy. Instead, because pride can be as dumb as fear, I set one more point, dead center of the street, tripod legs braced hard. In the scope, the church window framed the curtain. The shadow of the man was gone. In its place, for one steady breath, I saw the street I was standing on as it had been, kids on bikes, a woman with a hair scarf sweeping her porch, a boy throwing a red ball against the community hall and missing, laughter like wind chimes. I smelled coffee and bacon and dust that came from cattle and a bar of soap. It all held longer than a trick of heat should, long enough that I could have mapped it. And then it folded, like a paper model collapsing into a flat page. And there was only me and an empty street and a church curtain lifting and falling though the wind had not returned. I left the tripod and walked into the church because I needed to prove to myself that rooms stay where we leave them. Inside, the floorboards bowed with age. The pews had initials carved in them so deep they looked like fossils. A radio sat on the pulpit, the kind you plug into a wall in a kitchen, the cord plugged into nothing. It was turned up loud enough to hiss. "Mark set," my voice said from the speaker. Then it clicked, and another layer of static came and went. And a different voice said, "Do not record this line." I put both hands on the pulpit to steady myself and felt a pulse in the wood. Not mechanical, not electrical, the slow insistence of a heartbeat. It wasn't mine. I found my own pulse racing in my wrist, unmistakable, and this one set its beat against it like footsteps behind your own. Close enough to match, just a half-second late. I left everything there. Tripod, wheel, ledger. I took the truck and drove until the land began to show me fences that had owners. That night I drew the plat from memory, my pencil unsure. The lots refused to square. All my lines wanted to arc around that blue house. I slept badly, and in the morning a man from the bank called and asked for my deliverable. I said the truth, which was that something was wrong. He was quiet for a second, then said, "They all say that," I emailed what I had. He didn't reply. Weeks later, I was crossing my own kitchen with the mail when a thin envelope slid free from a stack and fell at my feet. No return address. Inside, a single page of a photocopied plat map. My name on it in block letters, a date from 10 years ahead of now, and a lot that bent delicately around a blue shape that wasn't labeled. At the bottom, stamped by a hand I recognized as my own, field variance accepted. Every once in a while I smell that sweetness again, grocery store, car wash, school hallway, and I pause and I count. And I listen for footsteps just out of sync with mine. Fog is rare where I live, at least the kind that sits low like a patient animal. But the night of December 14th, it rolled off the dry river like it had a reason. I was on call for volunteer unease, the unit on a 3-man roster, which meant I was nominally asleep on my couch with my boots complexly on the mat, and the scanner turned to a volume that bled into dreams. It was 2:17 a.m. when dispatch came through. Medical. Unknown. Fairgrounds outside Bristow. The voice unreadable. The fairgrounds hadn't held a fair in 15 years. They'd held swap meets and the revival that ended before lunch when the wind took the tent. And back when my father was younger, the rodeo. I drove with the window cracked because cold air helps the mind arrive at the body. The fog was a knee-high thing that made the world look cropped, my headlights rendering the pastures into light islands. I kept thinking about the way frost glittered on the chain link where the beam hit it and went timid at the edges. When I pulled in, the lot was a graveyard of rusty horse trailers and a ticket booth painted with a clown's face that had faded into something like grief. The radio popped once like it had been slapped. "Unit 3, you copy?" Dispatch said. "Copy," I said. At scene. There wasn't a scene. There was quiet and a light whipping sound that resolved into rope moving somewhere. The main pavilion sat low and wide, its roof the color of an old penny, one corner caved in from a storm years ago. I stood for a second next to the truck, letting my ears puzzle their way into the space. The smell was peculiar, not livestock, not the cheap beer ghost that usually lives in fairground dirt. It smelled like iodine and something sour like old milk. "Hello?" I called. My breath cut a white slice in the fog. The rope sound paused, then continued, slower. 911 was called. I tried again. From inside the pavilion, a woman coughed and then said, "We're back here." I should have radioed for a second unit. I should have waited. Instead, I grabbed the bag and walked into the pavilion with my phone light low because bright light can make a place mad. The fog thinned inside, laying there like a carpet instead of a wall. On the concrete floor, an outline of a rectangle showed where a stage had once been. A gurney sat by itself stage left, the kind you see in old photos, thin mattress, metal rails that don't look like they'd hold. The cough came again, behind the bleachers. "Ma'am?" I said. My voice sounded wrong, like it was coming from the wrong distance. I rounded a bleacher pillar and found no woman, just a jacket crumpled on the ground and a pair of shoes side by side pointing toward the wall. I put 2 fingers inside the jacket sleeve, warm, as if a person had just shrugged out of it and stepped out of the shoes. "Okay," I said, mostly to the part of my brain that wanted to yell. "Okay." My radio crackled in a smear of noise that turned into my own voice counting compressions. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, it said at the proper cadence. I hadn't keyed the mic. I hadn't started CPR. Across the pavilion, the gurney squeaked an inch. The wheels were rusty. The floor was level, but it moved a little, the way furniture moves when you're trying to tell yourself it didn't. "If this is a joke," I said, now talking to the air with badly concealed anger, because anger has always been my armor for fear, "I'll have the sheriff so far up." The rope sound started again, right above me. I tipped the light up. The beam found nothing but roof. No rope, no swinging sign. The sound slowed, like someone easing pressure on a pulley. I went to the gurney because that's where my body wanted to go. I put my hand on the mattress. It was cold and damp and smelled like a bandage that needed changing. The radio coughed into feedback, and then a voice, male, soft, said, "Start compressions." I did. On what, I don't know. I placed my hands and pushed down on air, on absence, on a shape that wasn't there until my palms met a resistance that wasn't concrete or mattress, something that gave and returned the exact depth my training says it should. I counted out loud because the radio had fallen silent. 28, 29, 30. I paused, performed a breath into nothing, tasted metal and a memory of cigarette smoke, then went back to compressions. Somewhere behind me, feet scuffed. "You're doing fine," the male voice said. He sounded like my father when he was proud and trying not to show it. "What's the patient's name?" I asked because the living question keeps the dead problem solved. No answer. The fog lifted enough that I could see the far wall hay bales stacked, a banner for a sponsor that had gone out of business years ago. On the banner, someone had spray painted a date, December 14th, 77. My hand stuttered. The radio sighed like a tired person. "Unit 3 status?" The dispatcher asked. "Working a code," I said, which is what you say when a heart has stopped and you're trying to bully it back. I didn't say what I was pressing on. The gurney wheels squealed another inch nearer to me, then another, like the thing on it was trying to meet me halfway. I cupped my hands to try another breath. A woman's perfume touched the air, old-fashioned and powdery. Under it, a sour tongue like old milk. My mouth tasted like copper. I'm not going to tell you the part where something warm exhaled into my hands. I'm not going to tell you because saying it makes it too big in the room with me right now. I will tell you the beat came back under my palms. Faint, stubborn, cross-grained with my own. I felt it, two thready pushes like someone trying to get out from under a heavy blanket. "We've got a pulse," I said to the radio. I said it even though I didn't have a patient to strap, even though the straps clacked against no body. "Copy," dispatch said. "Father notified." "Say again?" I asked. "Copy?" She didn't answer. The barn swelled with its big empty breath. The fog drew itself slowly toward the open doors like it had been waiting for a cue to leave. The gurney rolled back an inch, like a tide receding. Somewhere a cow lowed once and was quiet. By the time my headlights cut stripes across the pavilion, there was nothing. Jacket, shoes, a scuff in the dust like knees. I carried the gurney toward the door because moving felt like the only proof I had that I was still there. The wheels stuck at the threshold. When I looked down, I saw a wet handprint on the rail where a hand would grab to sit up. The skin texture wasn't mine. I left the gurney because sometimes the bravest thing is deciding what belongs to you and what doesn't. Back in the truck, the computer had logged the call under a different date, December 14th, 1977. The unit number matched mine. The narrative box was filled with block letters that looked like someone tightening their jaw. Code called at scene. Father present. Patient rose. I don't know what to do with that last part. 2 days later, a woman my mother's age stopped me at the grocery store. "You work nights," she said, not a question. "You were kind to my daddy once." Rodeo accident, Christmas lights still up around the pavilion. "You held the line while Dr. Pritchard came." She tapped my wrist above my watch with 2 fingers. "He said he felt your heartbeat through his. He never forgot." I smiled because that's what you do when someone hands you a fragile thing from a long time ago. She smelled like powder and a little sour, like old milk, and when I got home that night and put my bag on the floor, I found a hospital band looped through the handle. The name was illegible. The date was December 14th, 77, and under, attending, was a signature that might have been mine if I'd been learning to write it again for the first time. We were 4 people with flashlights and 1 bad idea, which is a ratio I should have recognized by 27. Sunday evening in June, heat still up off the asphalt, the sound of insects saw-blading the air. The old high school sat at the edge of town like a ship run aground. I don't even know why it was closed population loss mold. A bond that never passed, only that the football field grass had been cut into a neat crew cut by an old man who still cared. And the track was a cracked ribbon full of goat's head stickers that will put holes in your socks you won't find until they find you. The building had the particular smell that public schools keep forever. Wax, paper, faintly burned dust from heaters that are never quite off even in June. I held the back door while Nora jimmied the hinge because she has hands that know how things want to come apart. 5 minutes, she said. If it feels wrong, we leave. We say that every time, Ben muttered. He's the one who always laughs too loud when the first weird thing happens. Matt just looked at the sky, which had gone that deep blue you can mistake for coolness if you're not paying attention. Inside, the hallway swallowed our little light cones and gave them back with interest. Trophy cases to the left with glass cloudy from inside like breath. To the right, a bulletin board with curled flyers, Fall Carnival 2009. This place is nothing, Ben said. It's a building with an echo. He tapped on the glass of the case with his knuckle. State semifinalists, 1988. My uncle played on that team, I said. He says the whole town shut down to drive to Abilene. Nora put a palm against a locker like you do for a horse you don't want to startle. 5 minutes, she said again, more to herself than to us. It starts small because it always does. In the main hall, a PA speaker crackled, just a rubbery thrum like a hand slapping a balloon, and a voice came in faint and staticky. Good morning, Mustangs. We all stopped. Timer doesn't start until now, Ben said, and smiled too hard. The voice went on, a reading of the day's lunch, Fistata pizza, and an announcement about yearbook photos for seniors with last names. M through Z. It didn't sound old. It sounded like someone in an office down the hall had breathed into a mic without confidence. This is fine, Matt said. They're running a generator. He aims his voice carefully when he's lying to himself. The clock above the office door read 6:12. The one over the gym said 11:40. The one in the science wing ticked near inaudibly, and when Nora held her light on it long enough, the second hand reversed tremblingly 3 notches and then tried forward again. We came for a basketball hoop selfie, Ben said. Let's get the hoop and go. In the gym, dust lay as evenly as snow and took footprints just as clean. Our tracks wrote a story about who we are. Ben out front, Matt lagging to take pictures, me in the middle, Nora moving along the walls reading the place with her fingertips. Big places take breath differently than little ones. They make a body conscious of its own size in a way that can feel like guilt. The PA farted alive again. Roll call, the voice said. A through D. There was a pause that lasted as long as a swallow. Abdul? The sound of my own name in that tone made my scalp go tight. It used the way my mother says it, short at the front, the D gentle. Present, Ben said, because he couldn't help himself. The mic rattled. Not you, the voice said, and fragmented into feedback. We should go, Nora said, and I loved her for wanting it and saying it. We didn't go. We walked into the auditorium because it has a stage, and a stage invites the worst kind of courage. The seats were intact, the velvet tired but not destroyed. The curtain was down. When we got close, I saw the dust on the stage wasn't dust. It was chalk, a fine white skin, and there were finger lines in it like somebody had practiced cursive with their hand instead of a pencil. The writing said, "Don't be late." On the stage, a lone podium faced empty. I went behind it without thinking because my body wanted to know how it felt to be the voice. The mic was wired to nothing. The wood had a worn spot where a hand had rested, an oval polished by anxiety. From behind the curtain, there was the sound of a shoe scuff and then the smell of something hairspray, maybe, and the iron stink of old stage lights. "Hello?" I asked. It wasn't brave. It was tired. We stood like people in a painting stand too arranged, too still while whatever had scuffed took 2 steps closer without getting closer. The curtain shifted slightly as if someone had brushed against it with the back of their hand. 5 minutes, Nora reminded herself, and then under her breath in a tone that made my chest tight, "Please." The PA found us again, softer now, like the speaker was farther away. "Make your way to homeroom," it said. "You are late." The auditorium doors swung shut on their own and made that satisfying heavy sound doors make when they've had enough of being polite. The lights in the aisle came up dim, running like runway markers toward the back exits, but when we tried them, the handles were cold and did not move. Matt said, "Guys," in a voice I hope to never hear from him again. He was pointing at the wall near the stage where a composite of senior portraits hung in a grid of ovals. The glass was fogged from inside, but when he wiped with his sleeve, the ovals cleared slowly, and our faces were there, mine laughing at something to the right of the camera, Nora glancing down the way she does when she's caught, Ben with his mouth half open in the act of talking, Matt out of focus. The year on the bottom read 2009, which isn't our year. "No," Ben said, almost a spit. "No, we're not doing this." He grabbed the frame to yank it off the wall, and the frame held until it didn't. When it came free, chalk dust billowed out and my mouth filled with the taste of it, that elementary school taste that is almost pain. From behind the curtain someone said, "Quiet backstage," the way you ask for kindness and expect not to get it. We didn't run because there was nowhere to run to. The lights in the aisle went out. The PA hummed and clicked and a new voice warmer said, "Seniors, please be advised that your prank last night was not clever." Laughter rolled in, not mocking, just a communal roll of air. I had a dumb idea then. I said, "May we be dismissed?" Like a kid asking for a hall pass. The laughter paused. "Who is your homeroom teacher?" The warm voice asked. I said the only name I could think of, Mrs. Garner, my elementary librarian, because fear makes you inaccurate. The silence that followed felt like hands patting down a jacket for a key that wasn't there. Then the doors behind us unfroze. The aisle lights returned. The curtain trembled one last time with the shape of a person walking away. We left our footprints in chalk that shone for a second like footprints in a crime show under a black light. In the hallway, the PA said, as if to itself, "Good morning, Mustangs," and then died for good. The clock in the office read 6:12 again, and my phone said 10:03. Outside, the heat had become honest. We didn't talk until we were 2 blocks away. Ben laughed too loud and then stopped. "We said 5 minutes," Nora said. "We were in there an hour. I don't think time works in there," Matt said, and showed us a photo he'd taken without meaning to, the stage empty. The curtain bellied out as if someone had taken a last deep breath behind it. On the chalk of the boards was the outline of a hand. Not a print. An outline like a child makes around their own hand with a piece of chalk, only wrong in a way I can't pin. And at the bottom, under the not hand, someone had written, "Present." A week later, I went to a thrift store across town to buy a belt and found a yearbook I didn't recognize on a pilecloth cover, the school's logo in foil. The year was wrong for me. I opened it to the seniors and there we were again, blurred like pictures taken of a TV. I bought the book and put it on the high shelf at home where the cat won't knock it off. Sometimes at night I hear the sound of a PA system catching, a little tap-tap, and I expect the voice to say my name with my mother's gentle D. It never does. The chalk smell fades, but you don't forget it. It sits on the tongue of memory and waits for you to find it. The motel sat by itself off the feeder, a horseshoe of doors around a parking lot with an ocean of sky above it. The world had frozen on a Wednesday in January, the kind of cold you can feel even if you're standing in sun. The kind we call a blue norther because it brings a mood with it that belongs to a color. I took the job there after something else fell through because I know how to fix a lock and how to listen to a person's story without making it heavier. The previous manager's notes were a ledger of tiny wars. Don't rent to 14. Snake and laundry small. Guest and 7 leaves $20 under door every Friday. The office smelled like burnt coffee, wet carpet, and the sweetness of powdered creamer. Nights I slept in the apartment behind the desk, a room with a stove that clicked twice before the flame lit and a window that faced the lot. Traffic was a rumor on the highway. What we got were trucks that turned off with intention and couples who spoke softly even when they were mad. The first strange thing was the key to room 7. It was heavier than the others, the metal worn smooth like a coin that had been loved. It never sat where I put it. I'd hang it on the hook under the 7 and find it 2 hooks to the right, as if someone who knew the system better wanted it to be wrong. The cash that appeared under 7's door every Friday was exactly $20. Crisp, the new bills with the microprint like lace. The guests, if there were any, made no sound. The bed stayed made. The soap went unused, the little block with Lone Star pressed into it. I knocked 3 times the first week and opened the door with my master key after waiting the courtesy. The room was staged for a life, a pair of men's boots by the bathroom, one laid on its side like it had been kicked off, a folded newspaper on the table with yesterday's date, a cup of coffee gone cold enough to show a skin. The TV, an old boxy thing, was on and not on, gray with static so soft it looked like fog. When I unplugged it, the static waited a second and then continued. I thought of the blue norther outside that needed to get into everything. Okay, I said, because I've found that naming a situation out loud lets it hear you too. I left the door propped open and took the coffee cup to the office to wash. The smell clung to my fingers, hidden sugar and cheap cream, a sweetness people use when life is tired. Around midnight that night, the office phone rang in the way of old phone rings, harsh at first and then apologetic. When I picked up, a faraway party line crackle filled the ear. Front desk, I said like I'd been doing it 100 years. Do you have vacancies? A woman's voice, sweet like the coffee had been, a little breathy as if she was asking and didn't expect a yes. We do, I said. What brings you through? I don't know why I asked that. It's not my job to collect reasons. Work, she said. My husband's working. She named a company that hasn't existed since my father was my age. Room 7? She asked. That one is. I started to say the truth and then changed it. Yes, room 7. The line clicked and I heard the layered voices of other calls woven in. Laughter, someone yelling for a kid named Junior, a preacher praying over static. You sound tired, the woman said, like a neighbor making conversation over a fence. Cold, I said. It's the north wind. It's not the wind, she said kindly. He'll be late. The line went dead. Not the phone company kind of dead, the old kind where you can hear a wire deciding to stop. I put the receiver down and walked out to the lot. The blue norther had made something out of the night. The air seemed dense the way water is dense, different kinds of cold stacked on each other. Room 7's curtain moved slightly as if a person had breathed against it and turned away. I checked the other rooms out of stubbornness. In 3, a pair of hunters slept in their clothes with the heat on high. In 11, a couple watched a game show and argued cheerfully about the capital of Nebraska. In 7, the TV snow hissed like rain. I sat on the bed. It didn't dip the way beds do when they accept you. It held. On the bedside table, a registration card lay with the ink dent still wet from a pen. Name W. Dawson. Make model, Ford F100. Plate, blank. Date, Friday's date, which had not come. I don't write like that anymore. I used to, back when I tried to make my letters look like those in forms. "Sir," I said, not sure who I thought I was addressing. "We're square on your Fridays." The heater knocked like a neighbor. When I stood, the TV changed on its own and showed the front parking lot, my truck. The string of Christmas lights I hadn't taken down from the office window because their warm orange made the cold feel friendlier. In the glow, I could see the shape of a man leaning on the rail of the second-floor walkway, turned as if to say something to the room and then think better. He had a cap either on or in his hand. The picture was just bad enough that it both was and wasn't. "Late," the woman's voice said from the TV, though her lips weren't in the frame. I knew what I had to do then, not because it made sense, but because it was the next thing. I walked outside and stood under the walkway, looked up into the place where he might be, hands on the rail, elbows in. The norther slid through my jacket and made my molars ache. "You're paid up," I said to the winter, which didn't care. "You can rest." A truck engine far on the feeder revved once and settled, the long sound of a gear finding itself. Somewhere a dog barked twice and cut it off. When I went back to the office, a man stood at the counter with his hat in his hands. Early 40s, jaw tight, eyes that had known cold and heat both. He smelled like diesel and peppermint. He said, "7?" "7," I said, because it felt right to let a thing continue the way it wants. He slid a 20 across the counter and wrote his name. "Dawson. Careful block letters." "She say I called?" "She did," I said. "She said you'd be late." He nodded like this made a plan and turned to go. "Sir," I said, and I didn't plan to, I didn't want to, but the question was a muscle. "What's her name?" He put his hat on. "You know," he said gently. He went outside and the door chimed its tired bell. I watched the monitor because a thing had to be looked at to be real. He climbed the stairs, went to 7. He didn't use a key. He put his hand flat on the door and leaned his head to the wood like people do at hospital rooms. The door opened just enough to receive him. The monitor rolled once and went black. I didn't go after him because I have learned to trust absence when it declares itself. Friday morning came bright and cruel. The norther had shaved the sky close. I found $20 under 7's door and the registration card with my handwriting. The date on it was next Friday. I tore the card in half and threw it away. In the afternoon, a woman stopped in with a little boy in a red coat even though it wasn't that cold anymore. "You have a payphone?" she asked, a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We don't," I said, "but the office phone—" "No," she said, not unkindly. "It's fine." The boy looked at the rack of maps I kept, because some people like the weight of paper. He picked up West Texas and opened it like he was reading a picture book. "You going to see someone?" I asked, because the question again rose like a bubble. "We already have," she said, and the man in 7 coughed once in my memory, not present, but not absent either. When she left, I took the trash out to the big bin behind the laundry, and there on top lay the registration card halves I'd thrown away. Joined again, the tear mended with old tape that yellowed everything. The date had changed to the Friday after next. Sometimes I think about stopping 7's little river of time by changing the hooks so the key can't go 2 places down. Sometimes I think about leaving the door open so the room will fill and empty like any other. When the norther comes now, when the blue mood rides in under the wind and lays itself on the lot, I stand under the walkway and I look up. I don't say anything. I just keep the shape of the words in my mouth. You're paid up, you can rest. The TV in 7 shows the lot more often now, catching me standing there. You can't see my face. You can see the way my hands are in my pockets, and the way the wind lifts the ends of the Christmas lights that I haven't taken down for reasons I can't blame on laziness anymore. The boy in the red coat waves at the camera when they pass now and then. He waves like he knows who he's waving to. I wave back even when the camera isn't on. Sometimes that's what work is. Waving to the thing that doesn't look at you and keeping the key where it wants to sleep.